Hello and welcome back to another episode of our draft series. I've got Jon with me today. If you're watching on YouTube or the video on Spotify, you'll see Jon's got his Alabama representation here. We're going to be talking about Ty Simpson today. I will be playing point guard, I think, more on this episode than I usually do, as Jon is. I went to Alabama, but I'm not a diehard fan like Jon is. So Jon knows Ty Simpson very well. I'm excited to get into this conversation. I think there's just more to go back and forth on, I think, than there is with Mendoza, because Mendoza checks the box in so many ways. And with Simpson, there's things that he does well at times, and then other times does really poorly in the same category. So excited to get into that, Jon. Thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thanks for having me as always. I kind of appreciate you playing a little defense against my biases as a big Alabama fan. But as if anyone knows any Alabama fans, this season was, we made the playoff. Alabama fans have had it kind of good for a while now, so it's weird to say, but this was kind of a rough year, especially offensively. And I think that some of that comes through in the Simpson discussion. And some of them are like peripheral things that we'll get into with him that maybe weren't necessarily his fault. But at the same time, I think he contributed to some of that.
Yeah, and I think that does set up the conversation with Simpson well. Because of the way the offense was structured and how horrendous they were at running the ball, this is not the typical Alabama quarterback eval where you're coming in and saying, okay, he's got the best offensive line every game he plays. He's got Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram, name your Heisman level running back. He's got some of the best receivers in the country. Simpson had some of the most talented receivers in the country. They just can't catch the ball. So like the supporting cast you're typically used to watching from an Alabama quarterback is very, very different, on top of the fact that they could not run the ball to save their lives. So you see him in third and long so frequently and asked to do really difficult things. And I think his ability to handle those situations is one of the reasons why people are so excited about him.
Yeah, of course. The offensive line you mentioned, I think that last year they expected it to be like a really good pass blocking group that might be average at running the ball, which I think for DeBoer and staff is like kind of where they want to live. I think they're fine with that. But I think that they really struggled in pass pro, and they were horrendous at running the ball. I mean, like they couldn't get push against anybody, so there was really no run game to support him. And then he did, they had like they were misidentifying rushers. They had free rushers coming. They were sliding protection the wrong way. I mean, it was bad across the board the whole year. So and some of those things, you can kind of excuse for Ty. Like he was put in some really tough situations. And then to his credit, he made some really nice plays in some of those positions. And we're going to talk about like some of the chunk plays. I think that's one of his strengths. He excelled throwing to like the intermediate middle of the field, and it allowed them to convert a lot in some of those difficult situations.
Yeah, we talked about with Mendoza how it was, you wish it showed up on tape more. With Simpson, that just isn't really the case. Like they ask him to
Yeah.
do it all the time because they need it badly.
That was the whole offense for a lot of the year.
Yeah, and their receivers, I think Bernard is the guy that was more complete. You trusted him more, but their receivers aren't really ball winner types. That they are guys that like needed to have a lot of open space to operate in, and like create windows for them to get opportunities for yards after catch. Like that is the type of offense they had to run based on the talent they had available. He also dealt with some injuries this past year, so like sometimes hard to tell exactly, is he played at 90%, 80%. The offensive line, I think Proctor was hurt at times, started playing better at the end of the year. So just a lot of things were in flux for them throughout the season that makes the eval a little bit more shady there. But overall, I think Simpson is a very interesting prospect because he does flash at times throws that make you think like, like we talked about with Mendoza, like he has the throws on tape where you're like, oh yeah, that's the NFL guy.
Yeah, yeah, and there seems to be this discourse with both of them that like their tools are like not good. At least from some people, I've heard that, and I'm like, I, I don't think either one has elite tools, but I think Ty, similar to Mendoza, he has good tools. You know, they're plenty good. Um, you see the zip on the ball over the middle of the field, and like it, those are NFL throws. Those are easy to project forward. You also see him at times placing it in tight windows with velocity, even to like intermediate boundary throws. Um, and I'll say at times because I think we'll get into the consistency there is maybe kind of spotty, but like he definitely flashes the ability to make a lot of these throws. So I guess when we talk about like his strengths, I think that is one of them, that he has a good enough arm to succeed in the NFL. He's not really going to be too limited by like what people are going to ask him to do in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think let's get into the arm a little bit more because I think what goes along with that with Simpson and where probably the biggest difference between him and Mendoza is the size. He operates like he when he plays he looks like an NFL type quarterback, but Mendoza is bigger than you would think. He's 6'5", 235. Simpson is a little smaller than I think you would expect if you just watched him. He's 6'1", like about 210 pounds. And I wouldn't be shocked if he was playing a little lighter than that at times, honestly. Like he's pretty thin. One of the things I see, because I agree, I think overall his arm is very talented, and they can ask him to make a lot of different throws, and he has the ability to do that. He's not just a one-trick guy that can only throw at certain tempos or only at certain distances. Like he can do a lot of different things. The one thing I do have questions about with his arm is I saw a lot of times where he has to set his feet in order to be able to do that. And I think that goes back to the size, where he's not a guy that's going to be strong enough or physical enough to just win with the arm alone. Like he does need to get his whole body into throws and create that torque to throw with good velocity. I think you saw like on the run sometimes that become a problem. So I would say overall, like he has a like solid NFL arm, but I have a hard time getting further than that just because of some, like it does have to be pretty like a pretty pocket or like a solid opportunity in order for him to maximize that. It kind of not, this is not my comp for him like at the end of the discussion, but in that way it kind of reminds me of Baker, where like you'll see Baker just rip throws if he's in the pocket, but it's more of a challenge for him in some of those other situations to get that same type of velocity on the ball.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect level of comp for him as far as the arm goes, because and really when you get into it, I think Mendoza's arm is like just a cut above. Like
Yeah.
he has just a little bit more ability to make throws off platform, out of structure, without his feet set, without a base. And I think that it allows him to push the ball further downfield. Where Ty, like he was great throwing to the intermediate area, but then you get to that deeper, those like deep shots. I think you saw him pretty consistently underthrowing those. And,
Yeah.
we'll get into the accuracy later, but I think that just the ability to push the ball all the way downfield, I don't think Ty is like, I don't think that's how he wins. I don't think that's like his play style.
Yeah. One more note from me on the throwing on the positive side. I do think he has a pretty quick trigger. He is able to get throws off sometimes in difficult situations, especially like if the rush is getting home or if the window's tight. Like he does have like the flexibility and whip to get those throws out, which for me is important with him, because you like at least maybe when he's off platform, when he's rushed, he may not be able to get the same velocity on it, but he can at least get the ball out quickly and give his receiver time to make an adjustment, or more time for the ball to travel before the defender's able to close to make a play. So I think that is one thing that can compensate for some of the issues with really setting his feet and getting more velocity on the ball. Do you have any other? I think that's like most of my stuff positive wise throwing. Like he's constantly looking to push the ball down the field. He's very confident throwing over the middle of the field. Like, you see that as a part of his mentality. Anything else you would add on the positive side, or like do we want to move into more of the like concerns with the throwing?
I think you saw him layering pretty well
Yeah.
on throws, especially when you talk about the intermediate middle of the field, where like some of those lurking linebackers can like it can be a nightmare sometimes. I think you saw him do that well. Um, but yeah, I think we've pretty well covered his strengths as just as a thrower.
Okay, so let's get into the some of the weaknesses here. I wouldn't say that there's a ton of problems with his throwing overall. I think we've said, this is a guy that's solid but not elite. So I wouldn't say he has a bunch of problems. It's more so just like there's not as much wow on the film as maybe some of the top prospects. We talked about the velocity, that type of stuff. Generally, the other thing that I would call out from the throwing, and this gets into the athleticism a little bit that concerns me, is I just don't think he's very fluid throwing on the move. I think there's just a lot of spray when he's on the move. He's a little bit of an awkward athlete in that sense, where it just like sometimes it just feels like the game is moving too fast for him, and he's just like he gets to like he picks up speed as a runner, and he just kind of loses control of like the accuracy, the touch, all that kind of stuff. And I just have a hard time thinking that's going to get better in the NFL when everything speeds up, defenders are faster. Like, this is something that I don't think is going to go away anytime soon for him.
Yeah, you touched on something there about him kind of like the game seeming like it's a little too fast at times, and he gets frantic, and then it looks chaotic. He kind of looks like a little bit of an awkward athlete. Although, like when you get down to, we haven't talked about this yet, but he actually is a pretty good athlete. He can move pretty well. But when he panics, when like the rush is getting home, and he's like, okay, I don't have anybody that I feel really confident in throwing to. I think you see the panic on the field, and it comes out in like the actual play on the field. It does cause him to kind of spray on the run. I think pretty consistently he was not a good passer on the move. I think he won the most in the pocket when he was able to confidently step into a throw and know that he had somebody breaking open.
Yep, I agree. And so that's, I think, why the mobility is interesting to me is he's pretty fast and like a decent runner, but it doesn't get used as much as you would like to see it to create more throwing opportunities, as much as it does allow him to create just, stay ahead of the chains, avoid sacks. That's really what you're seeing from his running ability, less so than somebody who's creating a ton of offense out of the pocket. Like I remember, I think it's the first drive of the Florida State game, or one of the first couple drives, where he's just repeatedly scrambling and getting you in like third and short, fourth and short, even picking up some first downs. Like, that's a real value that he provides. And I think he's fast enough where that will stick around in the NFL. Just it won't be like a game-changing asset for him.
Yeah, and I think you see him doing that pretty consistently, to your point, against good SEC defenses. That I think that probably will project. Like he'll be able to get some yards on the run, specifically scrambling. They tried some designed runs this year with him, and it's kind of hard to evaluate because Alabama was so bad at running the ball this year. You wonder, like, is it his fault that this is not working? But I didn't really think that the designed runs translated well. But they struggled with screens. They struggled with pretty much anything, like counter runs.
Yeah,
they couldn't do anything. So like when you're talking like quarterback run game, it was really hard for them to get any of those designed plays running, and that's why they started throwing so many short passes to running backs and Jeremy Bernard and tight ends to try to kind of simulate some run game to the perimeter.
Yeah, I thought, because I agree. I think generally the offense was just like kind of a mess. I was kind of surprised, honestly. Like I really liked DeBoer as a coach, and I don't know. It just things felt muddier than I thought they were going to when I was watching the film in both the run game and the pass game. Some of that is just when your offensive line is not as good as you expected and you can't run the ball. Defenses can just play a different way than they can when they're really having to respect the run game. Like I'm willing to give that time and not make a declaration about that coaching staff after just this 1 year, but you see it for sure. I think Simpson felt like, to me, they had the most success with him when they found him opportunities to run outside of the tackles, like on a few more like sweep type designs versus just running him up the middle. Like he's just small enough where you really have to hope he gets through unscathed to the second level for him to really create something there.
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely true. Well, and this is maybe not connected to his mobility, but I think when you talk about the way that they had to play, there were a lot of perimeter throws. And I think this was one area that I was surprised looking back at it. I don't think he was very good throwing to the short boundary. Like
Yeah.
they had to run a lot of screens, and I thought his placement on those, his accuracy on those, was all over the place. Like that should be easy stuff, like easy completions, easy yards, and there were times where he was just making it a lot harder for them to get anything going. And that's where, like, we've talked about guys in the past who were able to on some of those short throws, even though they're easy, you could put it right on the guy, they're able to lead the
Yeah.
intended receiver to allow him to get ahead of steam and generate more yards. But Simpson a lot of times was throwing behind. He was throwing short. They were having to contort to catch the ball, and then you lose any chance at picking up yards on those screens.
Yeah. I don't know how some of you spend your Friday nights. I spent some of my Friday night watching Aaron Philo breakdown playing against like an FCS team at Georgia Tech. And one of the things you saw on his tape, which he's like one of the guys competing for Florida's starting quarterback job next year. One of the things that was highlighted on that tape is on the screens, he throws them with good tempo. He leads guys up the field. You don't realize how much of a difference that makes until you see somebody who's actually capable of doing it. And on some of those, Bama ran a lot of those kind of like tunnel screens, things like that, where
Yeah.
when they fail, they look like the dumbest play ever because you're just like running your receiver straight into a linebacker over the middle of the field. Like
Yeah.
they look so bad. But then other times you make like one guy miss and all of a sudden you've got four blockers ahead of you in the open field just hunting down smaller defensive backs. But the difference between those two can be just a little bit of ball placement that allows a guy to keep his momentum upfield or gives him a little more time to react and make a defender miss. And yeah, generally, there's just a little bit to be desired there. I had in my notes, there's just some strange misses. Like you just don't
Yeah.
expect to see those misses on his tape, given like the type of prospect you're expecting to watch. I will say in general, this is kind of also speaking to some of the short area throws, that type of concern. I was pretty disappointed in his ability to find the check down in a efficient manner. And this is kind of getting more into the mental process part, but I think it applies to like throwing short. There's just a lot of times where his first answer is his legs instead of finding the back who's positioned out. Bama, I feel like, ran a lot of concepts where they almost always had somebody on one side kind of like camped out in the flat, just waiting as a secondary option if the downfield concept on that side of the field didn't work, but at least it pulled defenders away from the line of scrimmage. And I just didn't think Simpson took advantage of those opportunities as much as he should have. So generally, like early down short game and late down short game, I had concerns on both of those fronts.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think part of it, maybe this kind of gets into his mental processing some, but part of it was his like commitment to throwing those intermediate in breakers, and he was so good at it. It worked so well. But when it wasn't there, I think that's a lot of when it wasn't there, and especially when the pressure was getting home, I think that's a lot of times when he panicked. And you're right, he wasn't even looking for checkdowns. He was like taking off and trying to. I mean, it was just scramble drill at that point. And Alabama's receivers were not great in those situations. I didn't think they did very well against man coverage. They weren't winning one-on-ones, so he wasn't really throwing them. And then also they dropped a lot of balls. So even on the rare time where he was able to do something, then it ended up in a drop.
Yeah, there's every time we watch a guy, there's like different things. You wonder like, will this get better in the NFL? Can he continue to improve this? For me, like one of the biggest questions for me on whether Simpson succeeds at the next level is his answers late in the down. And can he get to the point where he's not only relying on athleticism? I think if he does not reach that point, I have a hard time like seeing the vision for him because he's not a good enough athlete where he's just gonna buy time forever and
Yeah.
figure it out. I will say like we should talk about this at some point. Like he is very inexperienced for a guy that is coming out. He really only played one full season of college football. Now, he's not young. He's just inexperienced. Like he redshirted Alabama, set for a few years. So this isn't necessarily like an Anthony Richardson where he's coming out at 20 in the draft and you're saying like, okay, like we still have a long time with this guy. He's was born in December of 2002. So like he's not young, not old, but has not played very much in college. So you do wonder like does some of that stuff just get figured out as he continues to play more football? Like I wouldn't be shocked if that's the case because we're not talking about a guy that's played 4 years of college football.
Yeah, this was one of my biggest concerns with him. He is 23. He is older than Fernando Mendoza and has half the number of attempts because Mendoza played earlier, and
Yeah.
sometimes you can't really help that. Ty, one of the things that he was commended for is his commitment to Alabama, his desire to compete, to get better, he wanted to stick it out and win the starting position at Alabama, and he did that. And I think that is commendable. But I think it is hurting him in the draft cycle because he only has like 520 career attempts, and some of those were garbage time his first couple of years. So I think the lack of experience really hurts him right now because there are some of these things that I think would get better over time. But one of my concerns is like if he is going to be, if I think generally the accuracy is not consistent, that shouldn't be really based on his lack of experience because some of his misses are just clean pocket.
Yeah.
That's really just mechanics and practice over kind of separate from the experience where like some of the process and the ability to move on from what you think is going to be there. I think that would potentially improve over time. Like that could get better.
I agree with that. I think there's an interesting discussion in there about what people claim to value or say they care about versus what they actually care about when it gets down to the draft. Like nobody's talking about with Carson Beck right now. Like, oh man, I've got to downgrade him because he transferred from Georgia to Miami. Like they're all rewarding him for the season he just had. But then when we're talking about individual players, it's like, oh yeah, so glad that like Ty Simpson stuck it out and like he fought for the job. And then you get to draft season and it's like, well, this guy's only played one season and he's 23. Like, what's going on? Like, why does this guy have no experience? It's like, oh, you can't have both. Like,
Is it a positive or a negative?
This guy wasn't a 5-star coming out of high school like going to win the job at Alabama. Like, either he needed to go to a school like Cal, like Mendoza, and play, and then maybe transfer up, or he was going to sit. So I don't know. You can talk yourself in circles with there.
Yeah.
I do tend to think like you probably should just go play somewhere early on. Like I think generally we've seen that guys that don't have a ton of experience in college don't have a ton of success in the NFL. I think part of that is like a bias where we're saying if it took you 3 or 4 years to play, are you really that talented?
Yeah.
Like I think that's something that's in effect there. And I do think with Simpson, go ahead.
Just to touch on that really quick, I mean, Alabama had Jalen Milroe coming out in the draft last year, who was also like very toolsy but not polished as a quarterback. So, you had the new staff come in, and Jalen Milroe still won the starting job over Ty Simpson. Alabama fans, of course, I know many Alabama fans who hated that position. They wanted Ty Simpson to leave. And at the same time, they want him to go first round. And it's like, okay, well, if he's a first round quarterback, then you should want him to stay and play for you. And if he's not, then, but there's some illogical thinking there. But yeah, I think ultimately he needs experience, but I don't know if he's ready to come in and be successful right away. So I think he's in a rough spot. I think he should have stayed one more year.
These are the types of guys where, like, I'm just trying to think back to, who are the older prospects, the guys that took longer to develop in school that end up having success in their NFL careers that didn't immediately show as like a sophomore, oh, this is a legit NFL guy. One of the first guys I think about is Burrow, which I do think is interesting because to me the answer with Burrow is once his mental capacity got to the point where it was, he was a completely different player. Like once he had played enough football, learned enough to where his like solid physical traits plus a top 5 mental quarterback in the sport, like once that comes together, then yeah, like it might click at age 23 or 24, but like it's ready to go now. Simpson, I haven't seen that yet, like you did with Burrow in college, so it's just harder to believe it's going to get there. But people do generally have good things to say about him character-wise. He's a coach's son. Well, that's the case with Nussmeier as well this year. Like two guys that are both a little bit undersized, but are coach's sons, grew up in football, all that kind of stuff. So like, do you just see enough projection in the future where you're willing to bet on this? And I think if you're trying to make the case for Simpson, I think that is the case. Like this guy makes NFL level throws. He's a solid enough athlete, and then you're projecting more development in the future. I think those are really like the three things if you're trying to make the positive case that you see with him.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Like you're definitely projecting him forward and not looking at where he is right now. And I think that is the whole distinction between him and a Mendoza, where like you can see pretty much all of it right now. Like Mendoza is showing enough right now that you're like, I can see this working immediately in the NFL.
All right. Anything else on concerns that you have for Simpson?
Um, yeah, I have another one. Well, we've talked about some of these. I didn't think he was great against man coverage. I think that was when he struggled more than against zone coverage, where like zone coverage, he understood leverage a little better and was able to rip throws, especially to the middle of the field. But against man coverage, I think part of it was he didn't really trust his receivers to make contested catches. So he wasn't giving them opportunities where like Mendoza was doing that pretty consistently, and he had receivers that could win those. Um, and then the other one, I think related to his size, not just the injury concerns that I think are there because of his size, he had a lot of fumbles. He had like, I think it was 4 or 5 games in a row in the middle of the year where he lost a fumble. And, it's amazing Alabama didn't lose more games, because when your quarterback is, he didn't throw a ton of interceptions, but when you're consistently giving away the ball once a game, especially in the SEC, like it was really concerning watching that back, because sometimes sometimes he wasn't feeling the pressure, and it's like the opposite of him panicking when the pressure gets there. Instead, like he's just allowing the pocket to collapse on him, and then guys are just reaching out and like barely touching the ball, and it's gone.
Yeah, that generally I think that kind of goes back to the reaction to pressure. Like generally there's just a lot of chaos that you see on his tape, and the fumbles are another aspect of that. By the way, you're coming through a little quiet. I don't know if it's probably just bringing the mic closer.
It might just be my mic location. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. But while I was talking, I wanted to mention it. The one other big thing that I see with Simpson that does concern me is I thought in general the anticipation, the decision making, both on like throws over the middle of the field, but also like when he decides to attempt a 50-50 ball versus when he does not. All of those types of things were just a little bit worse than I was expecting. Like it's not bad. It's just not like elite processing by any means. There are times where we'll see this in one of the clips. Like I think there are times where he throws late over the middle of the field, and if he had a little more anticipation, he'd probably fit the throw in, and then it ends up behind the receiver, or it ends up getting tipped or whatever. And those types of throws, like if you're off by half a second, that's going to be the difference in the throw getting there. Mm-hmm. There's also times where like in the pocket, I just see him sometimes like he scrambles right so quickly. If there's pressure, there's just times where we'll see that on the tape too. Like I would just rather see him hang in the pocket sometimes a little bit more. I think there's probably some of that was just like my offensive line's not really helping me out. Like I got to go
what pocket this year? Yeah.
Yeah, I got to figure something out.
Yeah.
So that will be interesting to see how it changes for him in the NFL. But yeah, just in general, like I was expecting a little bit better decision making from his tape.
Yeah, I think that's true. You know, he didn't throw a ton of interceptions, but I think he had a few others that very easily could have been intercepted. And yeah, I think it goes back to that. Like he was late at times, and you talk about like pre-snap reads, anticipation. I think early in the season he actually did this a little bit better, but then as the season went on, I think he was fooled a lot by pre-snap disguises. You had teams kind of adjusting to what he was doing, and they were showing pressure a lot and then dropping out, and he wasn't expecting it, and then that led to some of these like forced throws or like he's taking too long to make a decision, holding the ball and then throwing late.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a tougher one. I think in general, like the things that you hope that translate for him to the NFL, you see them enough where if you want to talk yourself into it, you can. Yeah. But there's questions, I think, pretty much across the board on those traits as well. So that like there's a lot of uncertainty here, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's move into the clips. I think we've hit pretty well on Simpson as a player at this point. So let's go ahead and move into the clips on this front. So I will share my screen and we can get into that. Let me know once you can see.
Okay, I can see it.
All right. So we got one clip from the Florida State game. I'm sure you're glad I'm only pulling one clip from this one.
This was a bad game.
this was a rough one. And I don't know. I didn't think he was like awful in this game. I remember watching this in real time and thinking like Simpson's getting killed for this. Like he has no time to throw. Nobody on offense helping him out. Going back and watching this game, I did think he was worse than I remembered in real time. Like I think the overall offensive performance just wasn't that good. But he had very little help in this game. We talked about earlier, like throwing late over the middle. I think that's one of the reasons why in this game the offense looked so disjointed is he does this multiple times in this game. It's something that when watching him versus Mendoza, like is just night and day. Basically what they're running here is, and like what Simpson IDs is Florida State's in too high here. So like both safeties are playing deep. And they're running this little like skinny post. I think this is Horton. Is this number 1? I can't even tell. They're running this little skinny post right up. And you can see like Simpson IDs this pretty quick. Like he's got 2 high safeties. But he just takes like a couple extra hitches. And so by the time, I think that's 11 actually. So it must not be. But yeah, he IDs this, but he takes so many steps that by the time he gets this throw off, he's first of all late to it to begin with, but then he also misses behind the guy. And there's just a lot of times where you see this where if the throw was perfect, he'd probably still fit that in. Like it's not horrible in terms of the timing, but he sometimes just removes his margin for error, and then the throwing isn't perfect enough to make up for some of the accuracy spray that you see on his tape.
Yeah, and that is easily a throw he should have made, could have made, and those kind of misses did cost us at times.
This example against Georgia, which is one of his better games, and was a big win for Alabama this past year. This is the flip side of that, where you see some of the really talented throwing. This is a typical Alabama play where, I mean, we are stretching out the defense here and trying to open up space deep down the field for a dig. This is Horton, comes down, stretches out. We're talking like 15 like 15, 20 yards down the field here. We're clearing out the safety, we're clearing out the top corner, and we're making the linebackers fit this and trying to make a play. Simpson delivers this throw perfectly. It's on time. It prevents his receiver from getting hit. You'll see C.J. Allen here, the Georgia linebackers, trying to drop back and understand this. Simpson, I also think you can see from this angle, does a good job of trying to pull him out of the throwing window. So he gets him to continue to move towards the sideline, throws it right back over him into the window. Like, those are the kind of throws where like you can very quickly see like this is NFL stuff.
Yeah, and I think this is the one thing that if you were like really hanging your hat on Simpson, this is what you're going to come back to every time because he did this time and time again this year. And
Yeah.
it wasn't to like any one receiver, it was out of multiple formations to multiple different receivers. He was hitting these deep digs over and over again.
All right, let's look at one here against Vandy. They're in this kind of like split formation, like wide splits here on either side. Receivers are bunched up close, trying to create some separation there. Bernard is going to run basically right down the sideline here. Simpson does a really good job of identifying this and also throws this with the perfect tempo. So you can see Ford's kind of jamming Cuevas off the line. All of a sudden, you can tell at this point he's dusted. Like, there's no way he's getting back and making this play. Simpson, at this point, ball is already out. Like, no hesitation here. He IDs this perfectly and then throws an absolute dot that continues to lead Bernard. This is what we're talking about earlier, right? Like, not just making the throw, but allowing your guy to carry all of his momentum forward with him into the end zone. This is the type of stuff that, gets you really excited, and because you do see some high-level anticipation on his tape.
Yeah, and this is exactly where, like, against zone coverage, I think he was at his best because when he felt it coming open, when he anticipated the receiver coming open into an area of the field, he felt a lot more confident in fitting some of these balls in there where, like, he did not really show this all the time. Not consistently, at least.
All right, this is a little bit of a weird one, but just stood out to me as something that I saw consistently on his tape that was frustrating. They're going to run like a little rollout here off of play action. This is an example of a play where, like, if you froze this right here, it's like very straightforward what's about to happen. Like, you act like you're going to run. If the defender stays with you, you can dump this off to Bernard. He might score. Bernard does need to create space here and get upfield. Or if he stays with the receiver, you can run this for probably at least 5 to 10 yards. Simpson, his timing here is just really strange. He kind of just keeps running. He tries to make the guy miss. He waits long enough and then ends up taking a sack. And, like, these are the kind of plays that are just a little bit concerning to me. Like, there's just this moment right here. I just don't understand how this is not like a little flip up the field to Bernard. There's no way this defensive lineman's keeping up with him at this point. Even right here, like, what are we looking at? Like, what is going on? He tries to buy more time, tries to make the guy miss. By the time he sets his feet and gets back to Bernard, he realizes, well, this is not even going to get me back to the line of scrimmage, so I'm just not going to throw it. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of this on his tape where you're just kind of baffled by the decision in scramble drill.
Yeah, and sorry, yeah. There are times this year where he just held the ball too long, and I think it was partially the slow trigger at times. Really hurt him. Where, like, he's waiting, he decides, like, okay, this is what I should do. Oh, it's too late. And then he tries to, like, pull it back and look for something else. And then there's nothing else. And, like, this one is really odd because I don't know where he thought he was going to go after he waited that long. And he's standing there. And, they're closing in and really know what exactly he was expecting to happen from that point. But I think there were times this year, pretty consistently, where he held the ball too long and it resulted in these sacks and these negative plays.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like there's nothing else going on in the concept at that point in the play that he's expecting to get back to at a later time. So
Yeah.
yeah, just some like there's enough of that on the tape where you question some of the decision making in those situations. Okay, another thing that we talked about earlier that bugged me with him is his tendency to force a scramble when it wasn't necessarily needed. Bama against LSU here is attempting to run, and this is like 2nd and 5 or so. So like you don't need the world here. They're just gonna run Ryan Williams here right on this little hitch, and if you hit him, I think right when he turns around and catches this ball, I I would just be shocked if he was tackled one on one in this situation against a linebacker one on one. But you can see like Simpson is not doing that. Simpson is not starting to throw this ball. Simpson is starting to scramble to his right into pressure and then tries to come back across his body and force this throw to Williams after he realizes that he's not getting out of the pocket. So you go from a situation where, in my opinion, if he just stands, like takes 2 steps there, plants and throws this ball, he's potentially got a first down, most likely, and maybe even a big gain if Williams can make a guy miss. And you go from that to a 0 because LSU's defensive lineman stunts around to the outside, and you're about to eat a hit, so you just got to get rid of the ball.
Yeah, and this is where, like, in the pocket this year, I think he was really frantic too often. Where like he didn't need to go anywhere on
Yeah,
this play. Not only that, to your point, he gets the ball out too late. If it comes out on time, he wouldn't have even had to worry about any potential pressure. The easy, short, like very quick developing plays like that was rarely there for Alabama. Which, when you pair that with no run game, it consistently put them behind the sticks and put him in difficult situations where he's having to push the ball downfield. It also just it's a lot harder to stay on schedule as an offense when like you're not consistently hitting those.
yep, yeah. So the last play I have here, I think is a funny play because this play is simultaneously like very impressive and also kind of alarming from Simpson. He overall like IDs this really well.
Yeah.
He does a good job of like he I think he's expecting pressure and he ends up not getting it right. Like LSU simulates this and drops back out. They've got 5 different guys up on the line of scrimmage. They creep the safety up, but then 2 guys drop and Perkins is spying. So this is like a 3-man pressure with like a delayed blitzer off the left side. Like it's a strange look, and he does a really good job of identifying this. So like you can see here, I mean, schematically, Bama has completely won over LSU at this point in the down. Like you've got 1 DB covered over 2 receivers. Simpson does a good job of identifying this and hits this throw to Williams, like puts it high where only Williams can get to it. So even though these DBs are trying to recover and make a play here, they don't have a chance. What I don't really like on this play is he catches the ball on the 19 and then just backs all the way up to like the 25 and throws off his back foot. I understand what he's doing here. I'm not like playing dumb and saying like, well, why are you doing this? I understand it. My preference would be that like this is not your first instinct. Like he's like double hitching off of it. He doesn't get as much on this throw as he could have if he had just stayed and planted in the pocket. Like you'll see this throw has a little more loop on it. I think he could have thrown this with more velocity if he does actually just set his feet instead of fading away. But he's got a really impressive arm, and he has pretty impressive accuracy throwing into tight windows. So just like an interesting play for Simpson all around that I think speaks to some of his strengths and weaknesses as a player.
Yeah, this is the Georgia game was also really good, but I thought that there were a number of like very positive. This is one of the really good throws, but at the same time, you mentioned the tendency there to bail out of the pocket when you think pressure is coming, but it wasn't actually coming. There's a really similar play against Auburn in the Iron Bowl where the pressure does come and he makes the same play. But to your point, this is his instinct. And maybe he kind of developed it throughout the year with the amount of pressure he faced. But his instinct was there's pressure coming. I've got to get out of here. When I think if he had just stayed, he wasn't really going to feel any of that pressure and he could have stepped up into the throw and made an even safer throw than he made. Where like the DBs end up almost recovering in their rotation. You know, they were rotating the coverage to cover the guy who was brought late on the blitz. They almost recovered and got to the ball because he didn't get enough on it. He still has a good enough arm to make this throw, and I think that this play could be used either way. And people who really like him are going to look and say like he's got a really good arm, and he can make these kind of impressive tight window throws. And then you also see like the people who are looking at the processing are like, okay, but like why didn't he just stay in the pocket?
Why is the
and
window
throw
tight?
anyway? Yeah, this was a wide open window.
Yeah.
But
Okay, so those are some clips from Simpson. I think you see, like Mendoza, we basically just showed the positive stuff. I was saying earlier, like probably should have thrown a clip in of some of his over aggressiveness in the pocket, similar to some of the stuff we saw with Simpson. But I do think you see the highs and the lows on Simpson's tape. You see why people are excited. You see why some people have questions. I'm interested to see where Simpson ends up going in the draft because I do think this is a guy where like someone is going to talk themselves into this, but I'm not sure if it's first round, second round, like what that looks like. I could see a team like taking a shot on this and not closing the door on coming back and taking another quarterback next year if they don't feel like it's working. But it'll be interesting to see where he ends up going. I think we should get into comparisons now and then conclude with our grades. So I am curious if we have like the same person for this. I will let you start and see where you go.
so for comparisons, I think like with the style of play and the size, I have Brock Purdy, but
Yep,
like
that's
I don't
mine.
think I don't think he's that level of player. I think Brock Purdy, who I think in some ways is overrated even, but he is a good quarterback. I think that that's probably still a little bit rich. So he's like kind of Brock Purdy light. But I think just with the style of play, throwing to the middle of the field, the size especially, and the ability to run a little bit, like I think there's just too many similarities between him and Purdy.
Yeah, I thought we were going to have the same one there because I felt like it
Yeah,
was just so apparent when you're watching
yeah,
them. Like it's like the stuff you would ask Simpson to do is exactly what Purdy is good at in the
yeah.
NFL. And he is a guy that is a riskier player than you would think just based off of his reputation and maybe his numbers. But he's pretty mobile. He has a chance to create. Sometimes it looks really awkward when he does it, but overall it's a part of his game. Yeah, I think Purdy's a good comp for him. I think that is about the level of player I see him being if it does work. So like I had him as my best case comp. I don't really see a path to Simpson being a top 10 quarterback. I just think there's enough questions on tape plus questionable physical traits that it's hard for me to get there with him. But I do
Yeah.
think I think Baker's another name people throw out. Like I wouldn't be shocked if he got to that level of quarterback, like the 15th best quarterback in the NFL. Like I think that's a reasonable place for him to end up if he does continue to develop some of the things that Purdy has also gotten better with since he's entered the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's his ceiling is like a very middle tier starting quarterback in the NFL, which to be clear, like you can win with that, but I think that you have to have a lot around him. I think you have to have like a good
Yeah.
offensive line where he doesn't feel too pressured all the time. You have to have a receiving core that is not going to drop as many passes as Alabama's did this year. And I think you have to have good scheme on offense that fits what he does well. Like Shanahan for Brock Purdy, like he's scheming these things to the middle of the field that it's going to work a lot better. I think you start removing some of those things around him. I think he's not scheme proof, and he's not going to do it on his own. He's not going to be Josh Allen out there. Like
Yeah.
he's definitely not that level of player. So like without some of these things around him, I think like realistically he's a fringe starting quarterback. Like that's probably the 50th percentile, or like he's a backup.
Yeah.
I think that maybe is the most realistic outcome for him, is like he's kind of a career backup that bounces around for a while.
Yeah, and what I at least appreciate about the tape from him this year is it's not a guy where I'm having to question what does it look like if everything's not perfect around him. Because I think sometimes with these types of guys, that's where you end up. And that's like with Purdy on the 49ers, that's kind of the question, is like what does it look like when everything's not functioning at the level you would hope it would. And I actually think the past couple years he's improved in those situations. Like he's continuing to get better as he plays more in the league and continuing to take on more of that responsibility. You at least get that test with Simpson. It's just like, is it at the level that it needs to be a successful NFL quarterback? So I'll get into my worst case. This probably gives a good indication of where I'm going to have this grade come in, but I like hesitated doing this at first, and then as I continued to watch the tape, I was like, I just can't unsee it. Like my worst case for him is JJ McCarthy. I think there are I think there are way more similarities to these guys' game than people would think on first look. I think their size and athleticism is very similar. McCarthy, I think, got a little overrated as an athlete. Simpson's probably properly rated as an athlete, but to me, what you ask them to do at the NFL level is very similar, which is you're athletic enough to move around a little bit. It's never going to be a big part of your game. You're at least able to kind of create opportunities like within and around the pocket because of your mobility. I have similar processing questions. I have similar concerns about strange accuracy misses on tape. There's inconsistency. There's volume questions. So McCarthy, it was more so how many times per game he's throwing it. Simpson, it's the number of games that he's played to this point. There's just a lot of things that remind me of him. And to be clear, I liked Simpson's tape more than I liked McCarthy's. Like, this is my worst case for him. But there were just a lot of things when I was watching. It's like, man, I didn't expect that to be the vibe I got from Simpson's tape. But like once I watched it more and more, it was kind of where I ended up.
Yeah, and I think that actually makes a lot of sense. I struggled to think of like a specific worst case comparison because he reminded me so much of Purdy that I couldn't really get that out of my mind. But I think that one makes sense, and I think that is like, if things don't work out for him, that's probably where his career would go. Is like he looks like a bust in a couple of years, and he's barely making the field. Like he may kind of go down that path.
Yeah, and that's what I think my biggest question is. Yeah, like if he has to play in his first or second year, is it apparent pretty quickly that like, oh, this is not what's gonna work? And then maybe he does.
I think that's a realistic outcome for him.
Yeah, and like maybe it continues to improve from that point. He finds a comfortable backup role. He develops. He becomes the 25th best starting quarterback in the league, and like it's fine going forward. But I do. There was, I think the way I would say it is like, I think there's more downside here than I originally thought there would be going into the process. Like I do see outcomes from this where he is just not it's just not a guy you can start. And I expected the floor to be a little higher going into this.
Yeah, actually, same. I thought that he was going to feel a little bit safer with like some serious questions that would limit his upside. But I think that you still get like the good but questions with his upside while still simultaneously having a very low floor where like things just do not work for him at all. And like I think that is where he differs from Mendoza the most, where Mendoza, I think the ceiling's a little bit higher, But I think also the floor is a whole lot higher with Mendoza, where like even if he doesn't pan out as much as you think he might, like I think he's still going to be a startable quarterback, even if it's like mid to low tier starting quarterback. I think that is his floor.
Yeah, and I think that is one of like the things we were just saying about Simpson are like it just reminds me of the things that I felt about McCarthy of like why are we assuming this guy will just be the 18th best quarterback in the NFL? Like why are we assuming that
Yeah.
that's the middle outcome when the tape would tell you there's a lot more uncertainty there. And so maybe I'm like honing in on that too much, and because McCarthy ended up looking like that, like I'm applying it to Simpson. But I think there's just a lot of things that remind me of that with Simpson. So yeah, I think that covers the comps well. Let's now get into like to our grades for Simpson. So where did you come in at like big picture? Where's your grade at for Simpson?
Yeah, I had a hard time grading him. I think I kind of bounced around. I had to think about it some more. Um, I I don't have him as a first rounder. I don't. I think that there are just way too many things that would make me hesitate. Too many weaknesses on tape that you just can't be convinced are going to fix themselves. So I know he's getting a lot of first round buzz right now, and like he probably got a first round grade from the advisory board, and that's why he decided to come out.
Yeah.
I think realistically, I would take him like at the late second, early third turn, where like there's a lot more insulation if you're wrong. You know, if you even early second, that I think is there's still too many other potential routes you could go in the draft that like I don't think he's worth that passing up on some of the other players. But like if you're talking a late second round pick, early third round pick, like and you think he might just be a backup, that's probably fine. It's probably not the best utilization. I think when you're taking him at that range, you probably want to say like, okay, we think that this guy could get on the field late this year and potentially flash some things that we could maybe start him next year.
Yeah.
I think that that's what you're looking for with him.
I agree. I have an early third on him, lower than I was expecting to be. I think like I just talked about like the worst case being McCarthy. I had a late third on McCarthy. I think Simpson has. There's more things I see on tape from Simpson that make me think that like it's feasible that he reaches his upside, but I'm not sure it's going to be quickly, and I'm not sure he's going to have enough chances to really get to that point if he is asked to play early and struggles, because you're not talking about a guy with elite physical upside. So if the ceiling is not great and the floor is pretty low, it's just like there's just a lot of questions with him. But yeah, I came in with an early third. If one of those early third round teams that needs a quarterback were to trade into the back of the second to try to jump the rest of that crew to take Simpson, I wouldn't have complaints about that. Like if it's that close and you really like him, I understand it. After this, I was expecting to be like, oh yeah, if the teams at the top of the second round want to use their early second on him, I wouldn't have concerns. I still just think that's too rich for me based on what I've seen on tape. So will it happen? I wouldn't be shocked because somebody's gonna like him more than we do, but I think it's too
one team.
Yeah, but it's too rich for me.
Team, but,
We've seen guys recent like there. I remember the year we did the mock draft with Penix, Nix, and McCarthy. I kept just like taking all the quarterbacks, being like somebody's gonna take these guys, and like somebody took the guys, and they felt terrible about it. Like most of them after a couple years. So I don't know. Like I am more intrigued, honestly, now coming out of this evaluation to see where Simpson goes, because I have enough questions where I don't just buy that somebody's going to take him in the first, but I do think his range is like anywhere from middle of the first round to third. Like I wouldn't be shocked if he goes anywhere in that range.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's still like I think there's still a chance he goes first round, but I think that in the like aftermath of the season, as teams have done more research, specifically as media has done more research, and we hear like what's coming out, I think that there are more questions about him also in the media. So like I think his perceived value is kind of falling from that late first round to more like second round. But as we said, it just takes one team, and I think if somebody looks at the high upside plays and like, oh, he flashed some real potential in some of these plays and situations, I think they could talk themselves into taking him first round just because there are still quarterback needy teams. There will always be quarterback needy teams.
All right, I think that sums it up well. That is our Ty Simpson eval. I am now very curious to see if there's anybody else I have above Ty Simpson in this class. I thought for sure he was going to end up at QB2. I don't know. Maybe there's somebody else I feel a little better about than him. So curious to see where that unfolds. Simpson and Mendoza are the only two guys I've watched so far. So it's harder to have a frame of reference on where he sits with these other mid-round guys. But yeah, this more and more is feeling like a one quarterback class and then just a massive drop off after the first guy. So Jon and I will be back with some other episodes on the mid-round guys sometime soon. Thanks again for everybody for listening, and we'll catch y'all soon.